The child within you is not innocent. It is terrified. Every decision you make as an adult, every safe choice, every compromise, every moment when you swallow your truth and nod in agreement, comes from a small, frightened voice that learned to survive by becoming invisible. You call it wisdom, you call it maturity, you call it being reasonable, but it is fear, ancient primal fear that crystallized when you were small and powerless, and now governs your life with the ruthless efficiency of a tyrant who never shows his face. The inner child that the world celebrates, that therapy promises to heal, that spirituality asks you to embrace, this child is not your friend. It is your prison warden. And until you see this truth, until you feel the cold weight of this recognition in your chest, you will remain a slave to terrors that no longer exist, except in the shadowed corners of your psyche where a frightened child still cowers, making your choices for you. Look at your relationships. Look at your career. Look at the dreams you abandoned without ever trying. In each of these territories you will find the fingerprints of that child, the one who learned that visibility meant vulnerability, that wanting too much meant losing everything, that the safest way to live was to want nothing at all, or to want only what others had already approved. This is why your life feels like it belongs to someone else, because it does. It belongs to a child who never learned that the danger passed, who never discovered that you are no longer at the mercy of giants who could withdraw their love like withdrawing breath from your lungs. You learned to be afraid before you learned to walk properly. Before you could articulate desire, you understood rejection. Before you knew love, you knew abandonment, or the threat of it, hanging in the air like smoke whenever you stepped too far outside the invisible. Boundaries of acceptability. Your parents didn't have to hit you. They only had to withdraw their attention once. They only had to sigh with disappointment, to turn away, to go silent when you expressed something too loud, too bright, too authentically you. The child's mind, with its desperate need for survival, for belonging, for the approval that felt like oxygen, this mind learned the lesson instantly and completely. Suppress the impulse. Hide the desire, become small, agreeable, unthreatening, become what they want, not what you are, and so began the great betrayal of yourself, not by others but by the frightened child within who chose safety over truth, acceptance over authenticity, survival over soul. This child still sits at the eye, controls of your adult life, scanning every room for threats, measuring every word before you speak it, calculating the social cost of every genuine expression. But the tragedy goes deeper than you imagine. The child didn't just learn to hide, it learned to disappear so completely that you forgot there was anything to hide. You became the mask. You became the performance. You became so good at being what others needed that you lost track of what you actually were underneath all that desperate accommodation. Watch yourself in a group. Watch how you shift and adapt. How you become a different version of yourself depending on who is watching. Watch how you monitor reactions, how you adjust your energy to match the room, how you make yourself smaller or larger depending on what seems safest. This is not social intelligence. This is the child's survival mechanism, still running its ancient program of camouflage and compliance. You think you're being considerate. You think you're being mature. But you're being controlled by a trauma response that never ended. By a child who never learned that the danger passed, that you are no longer small and helpless, that the approval of others is not the difference between life and death. Even your successes are tainted by this fear. You achieve not from joy or passion, but from the child's desperate need to prove worthiness, to earn the love that should have been unconditional. You work harder than necessary, give more than asked, sacrifice what matters to you in service of what matters to the frightened child, which is always safety through approval. Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of the eternal return, the idea that you must live as though every moment would repeat infinitely. But what if the moment repeating is not your conscious choice, but your unconscious fear? What if you are trapped in the eternal return of a child's terror, playing out the same protective patterns across decades, across relationships, across the entire landscape of your potential? The existentialists knew this truth. that most of what we call living is actually a sophisticated form of hiding. We hide from freedom because freedom is terrifying to the child within. Freedom means no one else is responsible for your safety, your happiness, your sense of worth. Freedom means standing naked in the universe with only your choices as clothing. But the child cannot bear this nakedness. The child needs the blanket of other people's approval, the warm milk of external validation, the bedtime story that, if you just behave correctly, someone else will take care of everything that matters. Carl Jung understood that what we resist in ourselves becomes our shadow, controlling us from the unconscious. But what happens when what we resist is not just an aspect of ourselves but the very core of our being, our authentic desires, our genuine expressions, our real responses to life? What happens when the shadow is not our darkness, but our light? This is the predicament of the adult controlled by the frightened child. You have made a shadow of your authenticity. You have pushed your genuine self so far underground that it exists only as a vague sense of something missing, something hungry, something that whispers in the spaces between your performed responses to life. The child's fear has become your internal dictator, establishing a reign of terror so complete that you police your own thoughts before they fully form. You have become complicit in your own imprisonment, believing that the bars of your cage are the walls of a safe house. This is why your adult life feels simultaneously too big and too small. Too big for the frightened child trying to manage. It too small for the authentic self that never learned to breathe freely. You are living in the gap between who you became to survive and who you actually are, and this gap is filled with a fear so familiar you've mistaken it for personality. But there is another way to understand this ancient fear. What if it is not your enemy, but a messenger? What if the very intensity of the child's terror points toward the immensity of what you are protecting? Not just your physical survival, but your soul's deepest truths, your most precious longings, the parts of you that feel too valuable to risk. But what if there were another way to be human? What if there were a virtue that came not from the child's desperate need to be loved, but from the adult's capacity to love, starting with yourself? Imagine a courage that doesn't fight against the inner child, but instead looks directly at this frightened creature with infinite compassion and says, "Thank you for keeping me alive. I see how hard you have worked to protect what matters most. Now I will take it from here. This is not the courage of bravado or recklessness. This is the courage of a gardener who tends the scared child with tenderness, while refusing to let that child make decisions for the full-grown tree. It is the courage to feel the fear completely, not to transcend it or transform it or heal it away, but to feel it fully and act from wisdom anyway. When you act from this place, something magnificent happens. Your generosity flows not from the child's frantic attempt to purchase safety through service, but from an abundance so complete it cannot help but overflow, like a river that gives water not because it fears drought, but because giving is its nature. Like the sun that shines not to earn love, but because radiance is what it is. This new virtue asks nothing of others and gives everything to life. It speaks truth not because truth is safe, but because silence has become more dangerous than honesty. It loves not to be loved in return, but because love is the only response adequate to the mystery of being alive. Watch what happens when you begin to operate from this place of internal abundance rather than internal deficit. Your relationships change, not because you are trying to change them, but because you are no longer approaching them from the child's desperate hunger for validation. You begin to give what you actually have rather than what you think others want. You begin to receive what is actually offered rather than what you hope might heal the child's ancient wounds. Your work changes. Instead of laboring under the weight of proving your worth, you begin to contribute from the natural overflow of your gifts. Instead of seeking approval for your efforts, you begin to seek alignment with your deeper purpose. The child's frantic energy transforms into something more sustainable, more creative, more genuinely useful to the world. But perhaps most importantly, your relationship with yourself changes. You stop treating yourself like a problem to be solved and start treating yourself like a mystery to be lived. You stop asking, "How can I become acceptable?" and start asking, How can I become more fully myself? When you embody this virtue, the child within finally relaxes. Not because the world has become safe, but because safety was never the point. The point was always to live fully, to give completely, to show up as authentically as a flower shows up in spring, without apology, without calculation, without the exhausting mathematics of fear. But even this beautiful courage must know when to die. There comes a time when the mature soul recognizes that all virtues, no matter how luminous, are still constructions of the ego. All identities, even the identity of the courageous one, the authentic one, the one who has transcended fear, these, too, must be laid down like tools that have served their purpose. The deepest wisdom is knowing when to retreat into silence, when to stop performing even the performance of truth, when to withdraw from the stage of self-improvement and simply be. There is a sacred exhaustion that comes to those who have fought long enough for their authenticity. Not the exhaustion of defeat, but the exhaustion of victory, when you finally realize that even winning was another form of the game. In this silence, something profound occurs. The inner child and the mature adult dissolve into something larger than both. The fear doesn't disappear, it becomes background music to a dance that includes everything, excludes nothing, judges none of it. You sit in the center of your own. Life like a mountain sits in weather, present to all of it, claimed by none of it. This is where the real healing happens, not through techniques or strategies or new ways of being, but through the simple act of stopping. Stopping the effort to be different, stopping the struggle to improve, stopping the performance of having transcended anything at all. In this stillness, you begin to understand that the child's fear was never the problem. The problem was your relationship to the fear, your need to escape it, fix it, transform it into something more palatable. But what if the fear is simply weather passing through the sky of your consciousness? What if it requires nothing from you except the space to exist? This is the ultimate rebellion against the frightened child. Not to fight its fears, not to heal its wounds, not to transcend its limitations, but to become so spacious that it can exist within you without controlling you. The child becomes a guest in the house of your consciousness, welcomed but not given the keys. In this silence, you discover the deepest secret, that you were never broken, never needed fixing, never required healing. You only needed to remember that you are larger than any story you tell about yourself, including the story of being afraid, and even including the story of having overcome fear. The river returns to its source. The sun sets into the darkness that gave it birth. And you, after all your journeying toward authenticity and courage, return to the simple mystery of being alive, of breathing, of existing without needing to justify or improve or transcend anything at all. Now the choice stands before you like a doorway made of silence. Will you continue to let the frightened child make your choices? Or will you begin the patient work of becoming the adult your soul was always meant to inhabit? Will you keep seeking safety in a world that promises none? Or will you find your security in the one place it actually exists, in your capacity to meet whatever comes with presence, with courage, with the kind of love that needs nothing in return? This is not a choice you make once. This is a choice you make moment by moment, breath by breath, in each small decision to speak your truth or swallow it, to honor your desires or dismiss them, to show up fully or hide behind the familiar masks of accommodation. The child within will resist. It will whisper its ancient warnings. It's not safe. They won't like you. You'll be rejected, abandoned, left alone. And you will feel the familiar contraction, the old urge to make yourself smaller, more palatable, less threatening to a world that seems to demand your diminishment as the price of belonging. But you are no longer at the mercy of these whispers. You can hear them with compassion, acknowledge their protective intention, and then make your choice from the deeper wisdom that knows. Belonging to yourself is the foundation of all other belonging. Write these words in the comments, not as a promise to others, but as a recognition of what is already true. I am larger than my fears. Write it and feel the shift in your chest, the way the child within relaxes just slightly, knowing that finally there is an adult in the room, An adult who will not abandon the child, but who will also not be controlled by it. An adult who can hold both the terror and the love, the fear and the courage, the contraction and the expansion that are all part of the magnificent, contradictory, heartbreaking, and beautiful experience of being human. The journey from fear to freedom is not a straight line. It is a spiral, and you will meet the same frightened child again and again, each time from a place of greater wisdom, greater compassion, greater capacity to hold both the terror and the love that live side by side in the human heart. But each time you choose wisdom over fear, authenticity over safety, presence over protection, each time you do this, you become more yourself and less the survival strategy that once saved your life but now limits it. The child within will always carry its ancient terrors. The scars will remain, the sensitivities will persist, the old wounds will sometimes ache in the changing weather of your emotional landscape. But you can learn to carry the child with such tenderness that fear becomes just another color in the palette of what it means to be gloriously, completely, unapologetically alive. And in that aliveness, in that full spectrum embrace of your humanity, you will discover something that the frightened child never knew was possible, that you are not just surviving, you are creating. You are not just protecting what you have, you are offering what you are. You are not just avoiding pain, you are transforming it into something beautiful, something useful, something that serves not just your own healing but the healing of the world.